Hi, this is Gene Trowbridge, and I'm glad you found us. This is our annual report on the state of the private placement market in 2025. While you're here watching this video, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. So let's get started. Why am I doing this? Because I've been in the syndication and securities business for a very, very long time. I was a former syndicator for about 20 years, did my own deals. A real estate broker. I was a CCIM instructor. But at 45, I decided to change my focus in the securities world. And I went to law school, and I've been a securities attorney ever since that. I have a book, the fourth edition of my book. It's called It's a Whole New Business. And you'll get an opportunity to get a free copy of that book at the end of this presentation. And in my spare time, I'm an old runner, done quite a few half marathons. And as I get older, I get slower and slower. So let's see what the state of the market is. Well, these figures throughout this report all come from the SEC. All of us who are in this business file information forms to the SEC, which tells the SEC what we're doing, and they take all those forms and gather all the information, and every year give us a report. So the report for the end of 2024 was that there was $3 trillion raised in private placements. Well, private placements is a term. A private placement means we don't go to Wall Street. We don't go to the SEC to get our deal approved, so it's on the New York Stock Exchange and anything like that. It's a private market world, but it's a huge world. The private placement market is where all small businesses raise their equity and their debt. And in 2024, it's $3 trillion. Now that's down from 23. The market slowed down a little bit in 2024, but it still surpassed the 1.8 trillion that was raised on Wall Street through fully registered offerings. So it's a big market. It's probably a bigger market than the statistics say, because when we file our reports, there's a box that says, we think we're going to raise 3 million, but we might even raise more. So the SEC always comments that they think there's more money raised than what just shows up on their experience gathering activity. The important thing for my company, and most of you are listening to this, is 2 trillion of the 3 trillion in 2024 was raised in Regulation D. And we'll talk about that. And that's probably where you're working if you're in the securities syndication market. So if you're in the syndication world, you're talking about raising money from people to do something. We've done real estate, we've done hockey teams, we've done medical equipment, fiber optics, any asset where the owners of the company need equity can come to the securities market and raise money. And as long as there's a manager of that LLC or LP, it's a securities. So welcome to the securities world. And the securities world is really divided, in my way of looking at it, in two pieces. There's certainly the large public offerings, which we're not going to talk about because that's the 1.8 trillion that was mentioned. Small public offerings, Regulation A, Regulation CF, which is called Regulation Crowdfunding, and Regulation D. Now, in the securities world, every security has to be registered with the SEC unless it's exempt. So what I'm going to talk about is the exempt securities in the private placement world. So let's first of all talk about Regulation A. So of the $3 trillion last year, 1.2 billion was raised in Regulation A. And some of you might know about Grant Cardone. Grant Cardone has done Regulation A offerings. In fact, our firm did his first two offerings. And the current rules on Regulation A Plus is that you can raise up to $75 million a year. You can have an unlimited number of accredited investors. You can take non-accredited investors, but they can't invest more than 10% of their income or their net worth. It allows advertising. You have to do annual audited statements, and it's preempted from the state regulations. The state rules, which are often called blue sky rules, sometimes tell you what you can and can't do inside the state. But most of these exempt offerings are preempted, and Regulation A is one of those. Now, depending upon what you're going to do, Regulation A isn't very helpful, and you can see of 3 trillion, only 1.2 billion was raised in Regulation A. It's going to cost you maybe $200,000. Take 9 to 10 months, 12 months maybe to get your Regulation A offering approved through the process at the SEC. But it is a place that you can advertise and take non-accredited investors. Is probably about the only place that you can do that. So we see Regulation A on blind pools where people are going to buy a lot of real estate. We've seen Regulation A pluses that we've done on racehorses. The asset isn't really identified up front because it can't be, because you won't have the money for 9 months to a year to go out and buy something. But then once you're off and running, it's a good way to raise money. But that's part of the private placement world, is Regulation A. Now, if you don't want to do a great big offering that you can advertise to non-accredited investors, there is something called Regulation Crowdfunding, Regulation CF, and that allows advertising. You can take accredited and non-accredited investors. There's still that 10% rule about the non-accredited investors. You can raise up to $5 million in a 12-month period, so it's much smaller. But you have to go and find a broker-dealer. And the broker-dealers who deal with regulation crowdfunding have what is called a registered funding portal. And you sign up with them. They raise all the money for you from their investors, and they charge you a fee. Popular funding portals are WeFunder, Start Engine, and Republic.co. But generally, they don't like real estate. So that's a problem if you're doing real estate. But if you're just starting a business, something like that, that's a place to go. You're going to file a Form C with the SEC, and that's going to be the information form that you give to all your investors. And it does require ongoing reporting. Now, you'd think this would be pretty popular, $5 million able to advertise. But in 2024, only 249 million was raised in regulation crowdfunding offerings, and so that's not a big chunk of the $3 trillion, is it? But when you get into the securities, and we have to know what a security is, it's where you raise a bunch of money from a bunch of people, and there's a manager involved, whether it's a general partner or it's a manager for an LLC. We're in the securities world, and if you're in the securities world, we're back to what's happening. We've talked about Reg A, we've talked about Regulation CF. Now we're going to go to Regulation D, which is an important world. We already know that it's 2 trillion of the 3 trillion, much more than over here. And these offerings are exempt from SEC, and they're preempted from blue sky. So it's really the way to do offerings with the least government involvement. And Regulation D, which is 90% of the $2 trillion, there are two parts to Regulation D. One part is 506B, and the other part is 506C. Regulation D was passed in 1981, and when it started out, there was only one part, 506. And that said you could raise as much money as you wanted. There's no limit. You can have as many accredited investors you want. And in an effort to promote capital formation, They allowed you to have 35 sophisticated investors, people who are smart but maybe don't meet the dollar and cent definition of accredited. And you write a disclosure document called a PPM, but you cannot advertise. And so that was 1.7 trillion of the $2 million that was raised, the $2 trillion that was raised. In 2012, the Jobs Act brought us Rule 506C. And in 2024, Rule 506C only raised 125 billion. So it doesn't compare very favorably with 506B. But one of the good things about 506C is you can advertise. You can raise as much money as you want, unlimited accredited investors. Because you're not going to know the people, you probably have to take some steps, some third-party verification to be reasonably assured that they are accredited. You need to write a document, a PPM, and you can advertise and you can solicit. So in Regulation D, which is a big chunk of the 3 million, 506B is still where the market is. And that's most of the attorneys who do the work that I do are dealing every single day in Regulation D, Rule 506B. Now you can read all about all this in the securities world. My book, It's a Whole New Business, has good information. We talk about securities duties, risk and reward, entity structures, including tenants in common, the securities laws, lending requirements. How do you work with a lender in a security? What are the IRS rules that are important when you're in the securities world? What about accounting procedures? Do you know about capital accounts and passive loss rules and investor relations, which simply is more communication is always better. So in order to get a free PDF of my book, you go to book.tnllp.com. You take you right to the website, and you will get a free PDF of the book. If you ever have any questions, don't hesitate in contacting us. There's our website. You're already on our YouTube channel, but be sure to subscribe and get more of our good information on the Trowbridge Ney Law Group YouTube channel. Have a good day.